Let's talk about the best practices for shading and also utilizing route commit, and also whether or not shading inside and outside actually matters in match coverage. So make sure you guys are subscribed to the channel, hit that notification bell, grab out your notebook, and let's get after it. Now, I think the first thing that we need to do here is get an understanding of the difference between shading and also route committing. These are two completely different mechanics that have slightly different outcomes on the field. So I'm going to come out in a traditional spread set here, and I'm going to call just a generic cover one defense. We're not going to play press. We're just going to stay in basically an off coverage. Now, if you hit the Y button or triangle, if you're on PlayStation, it's going to bring up your coverage adjustment menu. The left stick is tied towards showing different shells. As you can see right here, we're single high. If I wanted to disguise this as a two high defense, you would see it would look like this. Just be careful that you're not out leverage something fierce, because that can be problematic, which I would flip this defense. This is for shells. This is not shading, although there are techniques that you can clearly see that will end up being shown here when you show different shells. Namely, in cover one, you have this alignment by your DBs, but if I'm showing cover two, I'm showing the techniques of a cover two, which means that you're going to get kind of this slot corner playing an inside technique on the slot receiver, and then our outside corners are playing kind of an outside leverage associated with what you would get out of a traditional cover two zone defense. So we're showing a different defense than we're actually in. That's not exactly what we're testing, but it is something that is worth mentioning, that if you want to disguise your coverages, this can be a little bit helpful for getting that done. Now, what I want to do actually with this play is I want to show you what shading does. If we hit Y and then we were to take a look at the right analog stick, there are a number of things that we can do. The first thing that we could do is shade over the top and underneath. This does not move your corners in any way, shape, or form. If I flick the right analog stick up, this is telling them to basically not get beat over the top. You're going to allow cuts underneath to be more effective. You're not necessarily going to be playing slants and out routes as effectively, because you're trying to make sure you're not getting cooked deep. So this is good in an end of half, end of game, maybe a third and super long where you're just trying to play for a fourth down and you don't want to get cooked. It's effective for man coverage in that regard. From a standpoint of shading over the top in zone or sometimes even match coverage, this comes with changing to certain zones. Namely, if you've got a defense that is kind of like a, for instance, hard flat style defense, or a soft squat or a matching style defense, and I shade the defense down, this is going to turn all of my flat zones into hard flats, thus turning match coverage off. And it also tells my hook zones to play underneath. Keep in mind that there also is a vertical hook bug in this game where you can do whatever you want and vertical hooks will still match. It's not necessarily a focus of today's video, but you'll see everyone's basically shaded kind of down there. Sometimes you will notice though that vertical hooks will do their own thing and just run off and match things. And if that happens to you, that's a bug. But overall, shading up and shading down is going to change your zones, in particular your flat zones, into different types of zones. And it tells your hook zones to play really aggressive underneath or sag back into the seam, so you're better defending deep in breaking routes like posts or digs, or defending the seam routes better to give you safety help in the middle of the field. From a man coverage perspective, shading down is going to try to play aggressive underneath. This is a terrible idea if you are ever facing streaks, because if you're playing off coverage shade underneath, your first step is to get roasted. And unless you have safety help over the top, in which case we did right here and it still didn't help us, you're going to be in a lot of trouble, because anytime you play off man coverage and you shade down, you're going to have those corners just flying down at their guy and getting cooked over the top, unless they're like super fast and can recover, or there's a speed advantage where they can recover. It is never a good idea to shade down out of off coverage unless you really truly expect this to be nothing but short routes. You know, maybe down in the red zone inside the 5 and you're playing man coverage and you want to shade down. The back of the end zone is kind of your safety help, quote unquote. You're not going to get a lot of streaks that are going to fry them. So, you know, those situations, shading down can be effective because it keeps those guys basically playing those players effectively. Now, if you're going to shade down out of press coverage, the best way to do it is probably from a press technique. The downside to this is that you can get cooked off of the line in press too. So a lot of times if you're playing like a shade down and your opponent's running, you know, drags and slants and things like that, that can be effective. But a lot of times you get beat on vertical routes off of the jam unless, again, you're fast enough, good press rating, good man coverage, and can get those knockouts. by staying tight after you get beat off the line. So when you're playing a shade down from a press technique, you're bringing a lot of things into the equation. Namely, you need to be good at playing press. Otherwise, it doesn't matter how you're shaded. Any streaker vertical route is going to give a good release, and then that shade down puts you in a spot where you're underneath a route that's running further away from you. So it's good against routes that break. It's kind of not great against vertical routes though. Okay. Now where man coverage, in particular shading, can be super effective is what I call bidirectional shading, meaning that, let's say for instance, I'm expecting my opponent to run a tight end corner. These are usually pretty good man beating routes that if you do nothing against them, they get a sharp cut win the majority of the time and can be thrown outside. So you see right here, like this did a good job of creating separation against man coverage, even though the man coverage was technically playing kind of outside technique in terms of like where they were aligned. It's just frustrating because a lot of times we see in this game that stuff like this behaves this way. This necessitates that we need to do something with our technique. Now, this year route committing is in the game. We'll get to that momentarily, but this is a situation where you might say, okay, I know my opponent is running one of those down and outside pass lead corners. What I'm going to do is I'm going to shade my coverage to the outside. Now, this is on an individual level though. So when you hit this Y button, you don't have to universally tell everyone shade outside, which is what we see here. You can if you want to, but this gives you issues if your opponent decides to run like in breaking routes from those other players. In this particular case, I would kind of expect for the outside technique on Andrews to be the best played, and the other guys are going to get fried. And then you still even see that Andrews won despite that shade, which is why I said bi-directional shading. So one thing that you can do if you really want to take care of this guy is you can play a universal shade down. Unfortunately, there is no ability to shade down against a player individually. You have the ability to press or back off individually. So what I could do is I could shade underneath, but then go ahead and tell on an individual level everyone else that I don't to back off. But again, they're still shaded down. So we're going to run into that issue where they're in off coverage, but shaded down where a streak could get by them. You're going to see that in this example. But let's talk about the Mark Andrews throw. We're shaded down on him, and I want to shade outside. So we're going to go individually by hitting Y, A, choose Mark Andrews, and then the right stick, we're going to say shade right. This is telling to shade him to the right side of the field from your point of view. We snap this ball, and you see he still gets fried. Now, I personally believe that this is a bug, and I've been saving it for the middle of the video for those of you that are truly hardcore watchers of this channel. I believe left is right and right is left. So hear me out. I'm going to shade the coverage down universally, and then I'm going to go individually, and I'm going to say, I want you to shade Mark Andrews left. Now watch what happens. Notice how we got beat by less, but it still looked bad. I believe this for a couple years. It's neither here nor there because most players aren't going to use this because route commit is a thing in this game, which is going to trump all of this. To route commit a receiver, all you have to do is hit Y, A, choose the receiver you want, in this case, Mark Andrews, and I'm going to say shade him outside with the left analog stick. Boom, shade outside. What this means is that I would like you to play a corner route or an out route. And you see that now he does a better job preventing that separation, and that throw is a lot tighter on the sideline, potentially intercepted. Now, here's the cool part. I believe that the best and most effective way to shade a receiver in this game is to do a pre-snap shade and a route commit. So watch this. I'm going to tell my defense, shade outside. You see all those players kind of flinched except for my slot corner on the tight end, or my safety on the tight end. And then individually, I'm going to say, hey, Mark Andrews is running a route outside. I want you to route commit outside. So we're playing outside and we're shading outside. We snap this ball. And you see right here. So what we're going to do is we're going to do a technique where we are going to tell our player to basically play an outside shade and then individually route commit Mark Andrews outside. So this will make it so we are doing a better job of playing corner routes. Now, here's the thing. Just because you shade and just because you route commit doesn't mean that your guy, regardless of their ratings, is going to just smother the route. The game would be far too easy if we could just go inside and outside. This is another reason, for what it's worth. You see how convoluted playing man coverage is? I hate man coverage, but I want to make sure I'm helping those of you that play it. So when we talk about like safeties, for instance, you know, our safeties on our team are not the highest man coverage players. So this is why a lot of players are going to end up running high man coverage corners at safety for the purpose of playing a cover 0 or cover 1 defense. You're just going to get better performance out of guys that can actually play man coverage. So just for the sake of kind of proving this here, let's put Jalen Ramsey on this guy. So let's show you this stock corner route that I was frying Deshaun Elliott with Mark Andrews. Now Jalen Ramsey's on it. We've made no adjustments. I'm going to snap this ball, and you're going to see that Mark Andrews still gets that separation. Jalen Ramsey is a good man coverage player. So let's go that extra step here on defense to say, all right, well, I'm going to go ahead and go to Mark Andrews, and I'm going to route commit him outside. This is going to at least give us a much better chance that a high man coverage corner can shut down this route. You see that, again, though, Mark Andrews is still frying, but because we route committed it, Jalen was able to kind of make up that ground. So we're not able to really destroy man-to-man coverage if somebody has good man coverage and they're actually using the route commit feature. I don't like man. I want to make that abundantly clear. I think man coverage is the worst way to play coverage in this game. I think that you're better off playing zone with switch stick or learning match, which brings me to gridirongameplans.gg. If you guys want to learn the best way to truly play man, which is man match, you guys need to go check out my coverage Bible. I show you guys within cover 2, cover 3, and cover 4 defenses, which include quarters, palms, cover 6, and cover 9, how to shut down all different types of offensive formations. I have it all broken down in my coverage Bible for you guys. You guys can take those teachings and apply them into any defense that has the coverages that you like. That way you can determine what run defenses you want, what blitzes you want, and install my coverage settings behind those to play your best defense of the year. So make sure you guys go check that out. But overall, I think man coverage kind of sucks. Even if you're going to shade and do route commits, it's just not that darn good. Which brings me to the next point. Does playing match allow you to shade? I've heard people say that it does. We know for certain that you can't shade down, because what that does is it turns the match off completely. Then from there, you're in zone and you're going to give up that tight end corner. So you can't play shaded up or down because you have to have quarter flats for match to work. But I've heard people say that playing match coverage and shading people individually with the route commit feature actually helps. So let's get a little baseline. I'm just going to run this call here. And anyone who knows match knows that Jalen Ramsey is going to end up playing the tight end corner. So when I run this here, you're going to see that he's going to match, and see how much better he plays that than regular man does. It was caught, but it was in traffic. Everything else has been wide open the entire video, right? But I've heard people say that in match coverage, if you say, hey, Mark Andrews, we are going to route commit him outside, that will make the player that matches him play outside cuts better. You're going to see here, not really much of a difference. Now, the real way to tell is if I put Mark Andrews on a post. So let's see if actually in this call, let's show you the base coverage here. And I'm actually going to move Watt so he quits bumping. Let's just show how Ramsey matches him on a post. In fact, he doesn't. He actually passes it off to the 3-rec hook, which again is why match coverage is superior. There's just rules upon rules upon rules that you guys will be able to utilize. So here are my final thoughts on man coverage, route committing, and shading. It is really only good if you are going to shade players and put zones on the field to protect their rears. I think that it overcommits. I don't think it's consistent enough in the direction that you do shade or route commit to even warrant being used. But I think that if you're going to do something with this, shading inside and putting zones to the deep outside of the field would be a better alternative than shading outside and usering inside. I don't think shading outside is good enough that it is going to force your opponents from running corner routes. You're going to be better off shading inside, putting your zone drops to the outside if you want to run man. But again, I am not encouraging anybody to run man. I think that it is a quite awful defense this year. So I'm going to leave it there. Go play zone. have a switch stick, play a little match coverage. I'll see you guys on Monday. Until then, this is Zan. Get the lab in. Good luck.